Welcome to Season 2 of the Making Bank podcast, where we continue our exploration of South Florida's entrepreneurial landscape with host Keith Costello, co-founder and CEO of Locality Bank. Sit back, relax, and let South Florida visionaries guide you on an entrepreneurial journey from tribulation to triumph, sharing the very stories that have shaped them.
Danny James, welcome to Locality Bank's Making Bank podcast.
Good to be here, Keith.
So, we're really excited for you to share your story today. Danny, I've known you for a little while. We're in the same Vistage group. So I have the pleasure of knowing a little bit about you and your business and your family, and you've got a great story. So we're really excited to have you on today. And I usually start off just by going back to your youth, when you grew up, your family, where you grew up, and any entrepreneurial experiences that occurred, when you were young.
Absolutely. I'm fortunate to be born and raised right here in good old South Florida, Fort Lauderdale.
Fort Lauderdale. Okay. Wow.
Up the road at Holy Cross Hospital in 1981. But again, grew up down here. Again, I consider myself fortunate to have grown up in this area. It's a great area to grow up, and ended up going to school here locally and sticking around here until about 1999. But growing up here, local schools right around the corner at Bethany Christian. Before they had bought Florinata and done some of the expansion, they only went to fifth grade at the time. Then I ended up going to St. Mark's for a period, then Cardinal Gibbons.
Okay.
And then off to the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy.
And growing up, did you have any kind of odd jobs, or did you have any business ventures that you were involved in as you were growing up?
Two jobs that stuck around. My first entrepreneurial thing was starting a shoe shine business at my dad's law firm. And I had one good client, and it was my dad. So it never got the traction to having all the lawyers, paralegals, and various employees there bringing it. But it was a nice first experience. But the two jobs that I had through high school, my first, which was Primo Subs, which Primo's at the time was brand new.
Wow.
And Elliot Olson, I believe, was the lawyer that started Primo Subs on the onset. So I worked there for about 2 years, and then
It was a lawyer that started it?
yeah, Elliot. I believe it was Elliot Olson,
But Borkson, was it, or Olson?
I believe it was Olson.
Olson,
but
okay.
that could be corrected, especially
Okay.
since this is going to go out on a podcast.
That's right.
So please fact check that.
Okay, we'll fact check it.
But got a job there as soon as I was able to work, get a little bit of extra cash, and then ended up working at a marina down in Miami, North Miami, Sunny Isles Marina. And, with someone that ended up having a lot of my roots in the marine industry and in waterways, that was a great place to have a job, working as a deckhand, cleaning the boats, either going out or coming back, and just being around the water and making money doing it in high school.
And what was it like? Your dad was an attorney, and what kind of advice did you get from your father?
I think the main advice when you're going through those interesting developmental years in high school is just do something that's productive. Because there's a lot of different directions that you can go with your time. And whether you're devoting your time to school and studying, or whether you're devoting your time to sports or making money, the most important thing is that you're doing it in a way that is constructive. So that was always one of his concerns, is that I was using my time in a constructive manner. And too much downtime, it's not necessarily a good thing when you're in high school.
Yeah, that's great advice. I have to use that on my son. So you decide to go to the Merchant Marine Academy, right? So how'd you decide to do that?
Well, I questioned the decision quite frequently the first year or two when I'd visit my sisters at Florida State, but I ended up making that decision. A lot of it was my passion of the marine industry and the love of boats and waterways. So going to one of the federal service academies, which is a federal service academy, so it's paid for. But doing it in a way where it had a military component, it had a Marine component to it, shipping component to it. And for me, that gave me, I knew it would be harder. I knew it wouldn't quite be the college experience that my sisters were having at Florida State or many of my friends at UF or FSU, but I knew that in the long run, a lot of that sacrifice and hard work would pay off and give me options in the future. Wow.
So that was a pretty, I would say, pretty mature decision that you made at a young age. So that's admirable. So when after you graduate from the academy, then what's your next step?
Well, I was at the Merchant Marine Academy, and one of the reasons I really liked the Merchant Marine Academy option was you have an option to go into any branch of the military, which was slightly different than some of the other federal service academies where you're set to either go Air Force Academy, you're going Air Force, Naval Academy, you're going Navy. There's a component that goes Marine Corps. West Point, you're going Army. Merchant Marine Academy was supporting every branch with developing maritime or officers in the armed services. So no matter which branch, whether it was Coast Guard, Marine Corps, Navy, you name it, you had that option. And then there was the component which it was originally founded on, and then that is to go work in the maritime industry, working for U.S. flag carriers and working in U.S. maritime and U.S. shipping, which is a big and important thing for our nation, which was started during World War II, which is manning the Liberty ships and keeping our U.S. goods moving around the world. So what drove me is I just got the bug to serve our country. And when I was going to do so, I wanted to do it in the toughest and hardest branch. So started going through Marine options and put myself on a path through officer candidate school to become a Marine officer upon completion of my education.
Wow. So you made some tough choices pretty young. So you end up in the Marines, and tell us about that.
So going through the Merchant Marine Academy, it prepared me really well for the Marine Corps, but going into the Marine Corps officer program, it's some of the best training in our U.S. military. Starting with 6 months at the basic school in Quantico, then going to a specialty school, which I ended up going into armor. But at that time, when I graduated 2003, we had just engaged in our second conflict overseas. So there was a very high chance that I was going to be deployed. So when I ended up getting my selection, I ended up getting my first choice, which was tanks and armor, and getting stationed out in 29 Palms, where I subsequently was able to pick up a platoon, a tank platoon of Marines, and subsequently deployed to Iraq in 2005.
Wow. So, well, on behalf of everybody, thank you for your service and for serving our country. So that must have been for a young guy. You're deployed to Iraq. You're in charge of a platoon. I mean, that's a lot of responsibility right out of school at a young age.
It was, but some of the things that to what I mentioned before, the training that you go through in the Marine Corps is, well, actually any branch is some of the best in the world. And the U.S. military knows how to train. They make training very realistic. And, going back to the business side, you don't get all that training, but from a military side and going into conflict, you've received very realistic, very strenuous, hard training, and you've been surrounded by, some outstanding fellow service members that you're serving alongside. So you're as prepared as you can be going into a situation like that.
And I guess from a leadership standpoint, there's probably not better leadership training than you get in the military.
Absolutely. I mean, from the start at any federal service academy, or I would say even many high school and collegiate sports, you start learning leadership, working as a team. And then that just gets compounded and exponentially improved as you get and go down that military path. So it's something that's constant, and it's something that sticks with you, but you never stop learning and improving at.
So how long do you remain, so you're in Iraq, and then how long of a tour was that? And
so my first deployment was in 2005 as a platoon commander, and my second deployment was in 2006, which extended into 2007 as a company executive officer. Those deployments wrapped up, and I stayed on active duty, but I got a job with Embassy Security working right here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where we were headquarters and overseeing embassy security throughout the Western Hemisphere.
Wow. And then how long did you remain active duty in the Marines?
I remained active duty for 8 years, and then actually just within the last few months have retired with my 20 years. So I ended up doing an additional 12 years in the reserves, which I enjoyed and stayed engaged.
Wow. That's an incredible story. So you come out of the military, you come out of active duty, and what year was that?
Came off active duty in 2010.
And then you have ideas to do something different.
Which leads that into the business side.
Okay.
You know, while I was on my second tour doing embassy security, I was moonlighting and going to a working professional program to obtain my MBA at Nova Southeastern, which is the H. Wayne Huizinga School of Business and Entrepreneurship. Yeah. So I already knew I had an inkling to entrepreneurship, which in the military, it's very much intrapreneurship. Because it's a very structured organization, but giving those entrepreneurs the ability to exercise some of those skills and passions. And as I was going through that sort of led me to some of the other possible paths that weren't necessarily just down the military route or federal service, but also on the business side.
And tell us about that. How did you decide what to do?
As with any transition, at that point in time, I was 29 years old. So transitioning out of the military, where you've gotten a lot of leadership skills and you've gotten a lot of, I would say, soft skills and people skills and leadership lessons, you might be a little bit behind as it relates to experience in an actual corporation or in certain industries that are parallel to what they are. So I was very deliberate, and even to this day, still love helping people that are transitioning out of the military in regards to how to do that. Because, you know, you start with a blank sheet of paper and it's like, well, what do I want to do next when I grow up? Well, I'm already 29. I'm already behind the curve in certain aspects, but you also got advantages and soft skills that might have excelled you past where someone in their 20s might have gotten leadership experience working in a traditional college straight into entry level in corporate America. So I started looking at that, and entrepreneurship was definitely one of the things I was looking on. Federal service was one of the things I was looking on, but I was also looking at local and small businesses through my network growing up down here in Fort Lauderdale and through the Nova, and was also looking at some of the Fortune 500 companies nationwide and seeing if my girlfriend, soon after fiance, and I were going to pick up and potentially move somewhere else in the United States to start that career.
Okay. And so what you decide to do, so what was your choice at that point after looking at all these things?
So it started with my second entrepreneurial thing, although I don't know if you want to count the shoe polish business as one, but it would be a wine import business. And actually one of the co-founders at Locality was one of the first guys I reached out to, which was Drew Saito.
Wow.
Obviously Locality wasn't here at the time. Otherwise it would have been here at Locality, but basically put some of our own money, raised a little bit from friends and family, and we started a wine import business. So overcame international shipping, overcame customs brokerage, and overcame getting wine to market as an importer. And we didn't have our distribution license, so we worked with other small businesses that were distributors to help us get our product to market. And we worked with many of the small business restaurateurs that are even around to this day in our local market. It was a great business. I learned a lot, but I think about after 2 years of it supporting the wine habit, which it always kept our wine fridge full, it was hard to make enough money to live in East Fort Lauderdale. So I moved it to a hobby status where it kind of stayed, and I moved all the product to another importer and distributor that was kind of self-running it, and ended up dissolving the business in about 2017. So about a 10-year run.
You still have the hobby going?
Yeah, I mean, my wife and I definitely enjoy drinking wine, but I am no longer an importer of wine.
Okay, gotcha. And so you ran that for 10 years?
Ran that for just shy of 10 years. Yes.
Wow, okay. And then as you're running that, as you're saying, like, turns out it's really a lifestyle business, right? You can make enough money, but it's never going to be the kind of business that you really envision going into to satisfy your entrepreneurial drive, I think, right?
Exactly.
And so you decide that you're getting out of that, and then what comes into your mind?
I had taken a deployment, and this was approximately 2011. So it was 2012, 2013. I finished my master in business at Nova.
And this is when you're still in the reserves.
It's still in the reserves at this point. And going into 2013, I joined up with a fellow friend of mine that I actually grew up with here in South Florida, and agreed to go out to Los Angeles to learn the freight forwarding and customs brokerage business, where, in a year, I was going to try to learn all aspects of freight forwarding and customs brokerage, and also obtain my customs broker's license. And what that was going to give me was an opportunity to catch up with, I should say, some of my peers or some of those in the industry by spending a year to really learn all aspects of the business, whether it's imports, exports, domestic, pricing, because I was behind the curve, but I needed to understand what all levels of that industry entailed, so I could eventually be successful and start up a branch here on the East Coast. So the end goal was spend a year out there. Thank goodness for my supportive wife, although she was okay with me leaving for a year to go live in California and travel back and forth. And we didn't have any kids at the time, but I went out there to really bootstrap it. Took a pay cut and really just was out there to work my butt off, whether it was 12 hours or 14 plus hours a day, to just learn every aspect of the business and eventually be successful starting up my own branch.
And Justine is here today, and she's our studio audience, so we're glad to have her with us. So you do that, you come back, and you open the branch here for that business?
Opened the branch in 2014, and we started it out of the house. Justine let us stay there for better part of a year. But I think it was after I had hired the fourth employee, we eventually got kicked out of the house. People were wondering what everyone showing up to the house was every day, but it kept the overhead low.
So you were work from home before work for home was a thing.
Exactly. Okay. And then we ended up linking with a local small business that does warehousing, foreign trade zones, customs warehouses here, Challenge Warehouse, and ended up moving in with them and, having a more professional environment as we grew our team and grew our operation.
So during this time, so you were part of someone else's business at this point?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Did you have an ownership stake, or were you just an employee?
So, eventually the year sacrifice and what I was doing was to eventually be a director and an owner.
Okay.
And because I had that entrepreneurship side, I never needed to be a business owner. I never really cared to carry all that stress and all that risk that's associated with it, but I needed to have the ability to exercise and go to maximum potential and continue to grow. So it was probably it was about 2017 that I ended up realizing there was more that I wanted to accomplish, and there was more that I felt I could accomplish. So I ended up stepping away from that business in 2017.
Stepped away in 2017 and decided to do what?
Well, we just had our first child. I tried to sell Justine on being a stay-at-home dad. She said I didn't help enough around the house. I ended up interviewing with 2 or 3 companies here locally, really soul searching and figuring out and embracing that next transition, because every transition is a chance to kind of reset. And while I was going through that, spending a lot of time on myself, whether it was meditating, exercise, talking to my mentors, and going back to that white piece of paper that had these few segments I could see myself in, and trying to find those people that had been there, done that could talk to me about what that was like. And I think it was after my second or third interview with various companies that I ended up realizing I was probably going to have to start my own company, because I couldn't find that company or that individual where my head and heart was going to be completely aligned and completely full, where I was going to, do that. So that led me to eventually starting Compass.
Wow. So, and that was 2017?
Yeah, the end of 2017.
And so how did you decide, well, I guess, how did you get that all started? How did you fund it? How did you get it all going?
So, true to cause, I just feel like I have a tendency of doing things the hard way. So bootstrapping, hose piping just seemed to be in the nature. So I had sold my original bachelor pad beach condo and had a little bit of money from that. And I set a business plan where I wasn't going to be making a salary for hopefully not much more than a year. Justine and I looked at our personal finances. We had a child, so we now had, additional responsibilities, but we put ourselves on a path where we could balance our budget, not go too much into our savings, not have to necessarily eat peanut butter jelly and ramen noodles, but I would be able to use some of the money from selling that house to eventually, hiring the first employee, who's Michelle Teratua. She's with me today.
Wow.
And afford to support the business operation for 2 years. And then at that point, I knew that would give us enough runway to eventually set up a business that was cash flow positive and profitable.
So did you, was there fear in doing this? Anything you had to overcome from a mental standpoint to just start
Absolutely.
off?
I think any entrepreneur that says they don't exhibit some level of fear going off and taking that big leap or that big step would be either forgetting or, a peculiar case, because I think everyone has fear. It's like, would you have fear in combat? Of course, but you find a way to harness that into positive. You find a way to harness that into the highest capabilities of you being at the highest performance that you can be, because you've put a lot of skin in the game and you put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it. So now it's time to go and execute.
So how did your execution go? So you have this plan, and how did your plan pan out in terms of getting a cash flowing business going? How long did it take?
It was a slow start, and I definitely took it easy for those first few months. But I had an employee who was very important to me, very important to the business. And we started operating. And as we got through our first year, I really got more active and more aggressive on sales and business development. And, we just started hitting year over year multiples and growth that was eventually making us profitable. But I brought the same mindset that I I had previously, where I was a little bit more conservative, and I didn't want to have too much of an overhead. I never liked seeing my P&L in the red. So I would even take sacrifices like not paying myself until a year and a half into the business, almost 2 years into the business, because I wanted to make sure we were still profitable. So I took that conservative approach, and eventually we built up to approximately a team to 4 and eventually 6, or actually 5 by the time the pandemic hit. But we were running profitable month over month. We were growing month over month and year over year. So I felt real good about what we had built from a foundational standpoint, from a finance side, but more importantly, from a people side in regards to what we were trying to build and the values and the culture that we were building as well.
And have you been able to just self-fund, or have you needed to go out and raise money or go to a bank for a loan or anything like that?
So far, we've been able to bootstrap it to where I think it was the end of the second year, maybe early part of the third year, that I was able to pay myself back the loan that I had given to the business in the beginning. So that was a big accomplishment. And then as we continued to use profits to invest in the people as well as the organization, we've been able to self-fund a lot of that stuff. But, I'm very deliberate about putting those dollars that the company does make and make sure a portion of that goes back to the team, and a portion of that goes back to our future growth and investments that we're making, as well as various things that I just wanted to improve as a business owner and as a type of business and partner that we were, both to our vendors as well as our clients, our international agents. And, that goes in the form of just paying fast. We pay our vendors very fast to really be a partner and have best in class vendors. Those are just certain things that we were adopting that takes a lot of cash to do that. But it was just a year ago that I had conversations with you all about just having that line of credit available just in case it was ever needed.
Yeah.
And if there's one thing that the pandemic has shown us is you can be prepared, and then life happens and the unthinkable happens. So,
Sure. How about, what are your plans for the future? Your business you've been up and running for what, 5-6 years now?
Absolutely.
What's the future look like for you?
The future, this stuff goes back to, I would say, on or around the time my third child was being born in 2020. And that was the realization that some of the things that brought us to year 3 were not going to be some of the things that got us to year 7. Mm. And one of the hardest things for me to swallow as the entrepreneur and business owner and founder was the role that I played. Knowing that if you have any sort of way of being too much involved in your business, you can do that when it's 1 or 2 people or 3 or 4, and you can be a little bit more involved. But if you're going to scale an organization and reach that 8 people, 10 people plus, you have to not be that limiting factor for your business. Because if you're making all of those decisions and it's constantly, all of a sudden you might have been the key person that got the business to where it is, but to get it above that, you're going to be you're going to be the governor for the business. And I think that was a tough realization, and that was really much easier said than done. But I slowly started to pull myself out of the daily decisions and the day-to-day operations and really work on how I was going to develop my team and my leadership and empower them to make some of those decisions and train them to get to the level that they were comfortable to do so, where the business is scaling and growing without you sitting there and making every call and every decision for the business.
That's great advice for any entrepreneur, and it's very self-aware of you to recognize that and be able to make that transition and grow your company. So, I've mentioned self-aware. have you had help with that in terms of mentors and people that have helped you?
That's been one of the things I'm most fortunate about. I'm surrounded by a lot of great people, from family to my Vistage group, the Keith Costellos and the rest of our crew, which is quite some outstanding business owners and leaders. I got some very close friends and mentors. One specifically that helped me realize in a very blunt way that I was going to become the biggest limiting factor for the business if I didn't figure out how to get past that.
Wow.
So knowing that you can invest in the people, in the systems, in the process. And I mean, here we are, what are we, almost 3 years later. And while it's been a deliberate, intentional path, I wouldn't say I'm there. It's a process, and it's something that's not a comfortable process. But as long as you're making strides and making steps in that direction, you're going to eventually get better, if potentially even achieve it.
That's great. Great advice. So what advice, if you could say, so you've obviously been through a lot, and you're still a relatively young guy, military career, combat veteran, you've led troops in battle, started a business. What advice would you have for people out there who might be watching this and thinking about starting a business?
If it's okay, I'm going to first talk about the military component.
Sure.
Because I'm a strong advocate for anyone that wants to serve their country. Number one, there's the part about just service, doing something bigger than self and serving something greater than self. And serving in uniform, I think, is one of those things that anyone can be proud of and fulfilled, no matter the reason that they actually end up doing it. And there's a few professions that I think also have a greater purpose, where it's not like you're making a whole lot of money, but the fulfillment that you get through what you do. So I would encourage anyone that's younger and might be mixed, right? They might have more than one goal. They might have business and personal goals, but they might still want to serve. I can't tell you how many people said, "Oh, I really wanted to get in back then." And it's almost like they have some level of regret. So I think the one thing that I would advocate or recommend is that those people that feel that desire to serve, do it, because you're not going to have those regrets. And frankly, the worst thing, if you think about it, some of the things, even if you don't get the exact specialty you want, you're going to get skills that are going to stick with you for the rest of your life. And whether it's the work ethic, whether it's the discipline, these things are what's going to make you successful, so that when you do start a business, they're going to be at the forefront of why you were successful.
I think that is really good. If I did ROTC and served also in the military and the Army, and I've always drawn on that. I think that's great advice. And I don't think you missed out on anything. I think the things that you've learned during that military service, are why you are where you are today, I think, in a big way. But anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I appreciate it. And I see those 0-5 workouts with CrossFit, that you do. And it's not ingrained or wired in all of us through our normal happenings of high school or college. So you get some of those soft skills that are the key to becoming better citizens, better business owners, better employees. And that's why I think a little bit of military service for a lot of people is a good thing. Mm-hmm. But outside of that, I think for those that are wanting to get, whether it's in the military or whether it's getting your experience elsewhere, building your skills out and getting some of those soft skills like hard work and discipline are those things that are going to make you successful.
And then what about taking that jump into an entrepreneurial business?
Taking the jump into an entrepreneurial business is the only other advice that I would provide. In addition, you got the soft skills, you get some of the experience, and then the other component that I mentioned is surrounding yourself with good advisors and mentors that can help you make better decisions, that can help you clear through what might just be a perception versus reality, facts versus fiction, and really help you make informed decisions. And I think that's one of the things I'm most thankful for, is that group that surrounds me, and I continue to build on that. Vistage is a big part of that for me. Mm-hmm. And surrounding yourself with those great mentors and leaders that you look up to, that give you advice, that are looking out for your best interests. They know you, but they also know some of your goals. I think that would be one of the pieces of advice I would think of someone that's looking to make the leap, is they will help advise you for the right reasons in regards to guiding you along that journey. But just don't have any misconceptions that it's going to be easy, because there are a lot easier ways to make a living. But if you're passionate about it, you got that entrepreneurial itch, I would encourage anyone that wants to make that sacrifice to do it, to go for it.
Oh, that's great. Great advice. So now we're going to go into our famous lightning round, which is where you just give quick answers to a number of questions. And we'll start off with a favorite book.
I'm going to go my favorite book that I've given to 4 or 5 people in my office, and it's You Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
The SEAL that went through 3 hell weeks, and just the mental toughness and how that rolls over into physical, mental success, you being the best version of yourself and pushing yourself. I enjoyed that book greatly. I just read it for a second time, and I've given it to some of the guys and gals in my office.
That's great. Yeah, and he does some great YouTubes and posts as well. What about a song that is like your theme song? You've got one?
Yeah. So a little bit embarrassing, but my daughter and I were listening. I can't remember which radio station, but I Will Always Love You by Whitney Houston, Bodyguard.
Oh, wow.
came on. Okay. And
Justine's laughing.
We kind of agreed that that's going to be our song, and Justine thinks it's silly and crazy, but we embrace it, and she gets in the car and she asks me to put it on. So it's our special little thing.
Good. What's the best piece of advice you ever received?
Shoot, it looks at me every day. It's the little paperweight in my office, Trust But Verify, Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
Given to me by my dad. And it still sits there. That's a good one that just stands out for me.
Excellent. If you could have dinner with anyone living or dead, who would it be?
So I thought about this for a sec, but John McCain.
Wow.
When you think of someone that truly lived a life of impact, challenge, trial, service, he's one that, I think I look up to in a lot of different chapters of his life, from, his pilot days to prisoner of war to post-service. It's just someone that I would just try to listen. I try to ask a few good questions, but I think I could just listen. And
I did have an opportunity to meet Senator McCain. On one of our Florida bankers trips to Washington. And what an amazing person, and truly exemplifies service.
Life of service, for sure.
We could use him today, I think.
Yeah.
I wish he was still around. What's something you're grateful for today?
It's got to be Justine. And
is that just because she's sitting there?
Yeah. No,
she's like, you better say me, buddy.
It's family. I mean, I didn't say this in my advice for entrepreneurs, but if you don't have that support structure, you can't do it. There's too much sacrifice. And I think the thing that I'm so grateful is that she's the wife and partner to support me in doing that. And I think any entrepreneur has that support, whether it's directly from their spouse and their kids, those people are going to be the ones that sacrifice as much as you do, because they're sacrificing and giving some of their father or their mother or their whatever to go be successful and mentor and lead a team. And that a lot of the times takes from that core support group understanding and supporting you wholeheartedly to go forward and have the confidence and be the best version of yourself, even though it's going to take and detract a little bit from how much time you're going to be around, because it's a lot of hard work.
That's great. How about what do you do for hobbies? You stay in shape. What kind of stuff do you do?
So not a lot of free times with the various hats. Obviously just retired from the reserves, so I quickly use that time, but a lot of it is spent doing things with the family. Any given weekend, you're going to find us either at the beach, by the pool, on the boat, embracing the true South Florida lifestyle, being on the water, which we all love, and being together with family. On the occasion that I do something with my friends or out, it would probably be my favorite thing is surfing. I just don't do enough of it these days. Fishing and attempts at golf, but typically those are far and few between these days. So,
well, that's great. Is there a travel destination I know you've done a few good trips this year. I've been on one with you with our Vistage group, but you also did one down a fishing trip that you were raving about. But is there something else still out there on your bucket list for a travel?
Well, getting to Panama with my dad to Tropic Star was awesome, and what they do down there. NOVA, the Oceanographic Center, is involved with the fish conservation. But I would say if we had one on our short list, I think it's the Greek Isles. But I've been dying to do a trip in a catamaran. Maybe I'm not the captain, maybe I'm the captain, but just kind of going around on a catamaran, whether it be the Caribbean or the Greek Isles, would be my bucket list.
Great. So last question, what has been your greatest moment and your most difficult moment in business?
Greatest moment to date. This is going to go a little bit deeper and hopefully not too long, but a large part, people ask why I started the business. And my wife, not just because she's here, worked for over 15 years, almost 17 years at Channel 10. And I was completely fine. She always made more money than I did when I was in the military. She had a very successful career, a wonderful team over there at ABC Channel 10. And as we started having kids, it was always a goal of mine to eventually set up a successful business where if she didn't have to work as hard and wanted to spend more time with the kids and at home, that she would have that flexibility to do so. So I think the greatest moment was in 2021 when I told her, I think the business is finally there. And I think it was a few days later. She didn't take long to make the decision and went out with style and class as she does things. But that was certainly, that just sticks out in my mind.
That's great.
So
how about toughest?
Man, there's been a lot of tough chapters. I mean, starting a business, that's why I don't sugarcoat it and I'm just direct about it. There's a lot of sacrifice. There's a lot of hard times. There's a lot where someone that's as passionate or driven, you kind of get disappointed or you get hurt. But I would say that the hardest has probably been where I had to make a decision that was for my personal and one of my personal relationships that meant a lot to me, but ended up being better for the company. So I had to sacrifice what was personally more comfortable or closer to what's in the best interest for the organization and the people within the organization. And I think that's one of the hardest things that any entrepreneur, but I think it's important that when you are the CEO, that you build that confidence to when you have to make a decision. Because if you're adjusting behaviors and things for an exception, it's becoming the norm because you're allowing it to happen. And I think that was sort of the hardest lessons that I've had to go through personally, because it wasn't easy, and it was very hard.
Wow. So how can people get in touch with you?
Shoot, probably the website, social media.
Website is
email.
what? Let's see.
www.compasslogisticsmarine.com.
Okay.
And our handles, I think it's called a handle. I'm not, it's social, but the Instagram, LinkedIn, it's all compasslogisticsmarine.com.
Okay. And you're on LinkedIn too?
I'm on LinkedIn.
All right.
And
Excellent.
yeah, I'd love to talk to anyone. Certainly I've been surrounded by a bunch of people that have given me free advice and recommendations, and I'd love to pay it forward. So.
Great. Well, Danny James and Justine James, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Keith. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thanks for tuning in to Locality's Making Bank podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform to catch the latest episodes, and visit localitybank.com today to learn more about all the benefits of banking local.